Hey guys, welcome back to the Edit Place, and today we're back in DaVinci Resolve and we're going to be talking about all the different ways that you can improve playback on your machine. Maybe you're on a lower powered laptop or whatever it may be, but you're finding that your timelines, your playback settings just aren't cutting it for you and it's super annoying. Maybe you're dealing with 4K footage or up, and yeah, so there's a ton of different ways that you can try and help. Some obvious, some not so obvious, and so we're just going to run through them all in no particular order, and hopefully you guys get some good info out of this and can improve your playback. Don't forget to leave me a comment down below if this helped you in any way and helped others. So here I have open a pretty gnarly trailer that I just cut together, and this is all in 6K. And so currently in its full playback setting, you can see from my frame rate little clock up above that it's not doing terrible. Again, I am doing screen capture, so for me that affects performance greatly. For you guys, it's probably looking like 5 frames per second or something like that. But yeah, so let's see what we can do about this to improve. Obviously, we have a ton of different layers of footage and different audio and sound effects down below. So the first and the easiest thing, we actually covered in our first video, is this little guy up here to turn off all color grades and effects. A lot of clips that you add, especially heavy color grades, noise reduction, adding grain, or any sort of like open FX type stuff is going to greatly impact your computer. So just turning that off is going to definitely improve performance. You can already see a pretty decently improved playback scenario here. Still not perfect, but once we get to clips like that, we're pretty much good. So now it's the crazy stuff, the fast action and water and all those crazy fast moving clips require a little bit more. Now your second way is actually under your playback settings. So up here at the top under playback, you have actually a handful of options in here. You can go under proxy mode. So if you have it set up to create proxies, you can go with half, quarter, and you can see, maybe not on my screen here, but I noticed a significant quality loss right here. So I went down to quarter speed, or not quarter speed, quarter quality. And again, it's playing back a lot better right here. If I want to turn that off and I want to render my timeline out, obviously when something's done, it's going to take a lot longer than when you just import it. If you go under here under render cache under playback settings, and you go to smart, you've probably seen this in other programs. Now there's this red bar above your timeline. Blue is where it's already rendered, so I had a couple clips pre-render here, and you can see that it pretty much always starts where your playhead is. That's the smart aspect of it. One extra thing while we're waiting for this to render out is, even outside your editing program, make sure that you have all like CPU and GPU heavy programs completely closed, because that's greatly going to affect it. Like Chrome will suck your computer dry of resources, especially like RAM and stuff. And so simply by closing any and all programs that you can outside of the program, in addition to the stuff that we're doing, always a bonus. And last step outside the program as well is, again, let's say you're like editing on a laptop and you have it hooked up to a different screen, or like me with dual screens here. Anytime you are running multiple displays, it's going to be very taxing, again, on especially your GPU. So if you don't have a ton of those resources in excess, you may want to, while you're rendering stuff, unplug that secondary monitor, and you also will notice a huge speed improvement as well. Okay, and as you can see here, our blue line is basically all filled up, just one clip ready to go here. But you can notice that as soon as I hit spacebar, this thing is playing back perfectly, full color grades and full resolution and all that. So while it takes a while to do that render, as long as you have it set up properly, you're good to go. Now, for whatever reason, if that's not working for you or you don't want to do that, another thing you can do is create optimized media, kind of like the render cache. It does take a while. You basically select one clip, multiple clips, all your clips, especially if something is like a VFX clip that's really heavy. You can right click on it and go to generate optimized media, and you'll see this loading bar in here. You can't really do anything else while that is happening. So just keep that in mind, that you can't click or go to another page or anything like that. And you can see that it's going to take about 2 minutes to do each, like literally just these 2 simple clips. Hey, real quick, while editing this video, just want to add in a little sidebar explanation. Why would you want to go with optimized media rather than rendering out the timeline? Well, optimized media is going to create a smaller, easier to work with file for that specific clip that you can use anywhere in the project, while rendering the timeline is looking at where you are placing the media and assets in each particular part of the timeline. And so if you rearrange clips, then it's going to have to re-render that section, obviously taking more time. So some people may want to generate optimized media in the beginning, and that way as you move things around, you're not constantly waiting for things to re-render. You can just, start a new project, import all your media, generate optimized media for everything, go do other stuff or however long it takes to do that, and then come back and know that you have very simple footage to work with rather than having to wait for it to re-render. Back to the video. Another thing we've talked about in the last video was under File, Project Settings. You can actually change your timeline resolution. So right now we're using 4K clips, and that's fine. But while I'm editing, I may drop it down to 1080. Obviously, the source footage is still 6K, but I'm going to put this down to 1080. As well as down here, this is also a good spot where you can check where the optimized media, what the format is. So for example, you probably don't want to do ProRes 422 HQ because depending on the footage you're shooting in, that may be even bigger files. So something like the proxy will be really good. ProRes proxy is really good codec. But I'm going to go to 1080. I'm going to see it kind of jump for a second. And now instead of 4K, this is 1080. And as you can see, it's playing back like butter. Again, just keep in mind that depending on the aspect ratio of your footage, you may see black bars when you change the timeline resolution. To fix that, just make sure you select all of your clips and go over here to retiming and scaling, and the third one down under scaling, make sure it is set to fill. That way, no matter what timeline resolution you change it to, it's always going to scale that footage to that timeline. Now usually what I'll do if I'm editing in a 1080 timeline, I go through, edit everything, and then right before I go to render, I go back to project settings and I go and change the timeline resolution back. Everything's going to scale up. I quickly scrub through, make sure there's no clips showing black bars or anything, and make sure that everything is good there. In the last little section here that can help us out with performance issues is under DaVinci Resolve Preferences, and then we're going to go to System instead of User, and Memory and GPU. So this is where it's going to look at your system and say, okay, what sort of resources can we take away? And you see that I have everything maxed out, so my system has 64 gigs, so I'm allowing Resolve to take 48 of that and Fusion 36. And this is where this is part of the reason why you want to close everything else out, because if I have Resolve taking 48 gigs of RAM and then Chrome's taking like another 15 or 20, then my computer is completely maxed out, and that's where like crashes and things like that start to happen. Under GPU configuration, you can also now set manual mode. If you have multiple GPUs, you can tell it which ones to use. So if you have like a really good card and not so good card, you can say, hey, definitely use this one primarily and only. Mine are the exact same, so I just set it to auto. And then if you're on a Mac, I'd highly suggest changing it to Metal. That's like Apple's GPU acceleration type techniques, and you'll notice some significant playback increases there. But you can play around with Auto or OpenCL or CUDA. But CUDA, I believe, is only going to be relevant. I'm sure the computer nerds will correct me if I'm wrong. If you have NVIDIA graphics cards, and I do not, so this is kind of useless for me. So my guess, if you're on a Mac, use Metal because you don't have a NVIDIA card. So there you guys have it. Definitely one of those tips should at least help a lot in your playback performance. Let me know down in the comments below which one helped you out the most, and maybe if people can see, oh man, all these comments are saying the smart render, the one is the way to go, then people can easily see that as a resource. Thanks for stopping by in the edit place, and I'll see you guys in the next video.